This is Basket Case Clubs, CPR Group's podcast where we turn basket case clubs into showcase clubs. Welcome to another episode of Basket Case Clubs. Joining me again tonight is Steve. Steve, welcome.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us again. We are having heaps of fun recording these podcasts, and we also had the pleasure yesterday of interviewing Sharon and James from Suncoast Spinners Wheelchair Basketball Club. Based on the Sunshine Coast, the club has been around for almost bang on 10 years now. And when Sharon, James, and a few other newbies got involved about 4 or 5 years ago, the club was a bit of a basket case.
Hence why they're going to be the subject of our episode tonight, hey?
Yeah, lucky number one off the rank for interview, which is really exciting. They were very excited about the prospect of having a chat with us for the podcast, and they really are a great example of a club that has gone from being a bit of a basket case back in 2016 to becoming a real showcase now. They have accessed huge amounts of particularly federal government funding for delivery of some innovative programs. So one of them, which you'll hear mentioned in the interview, is reverse inclusion. And it's a program that's all about trying to educate people regarding wheelchair sports or sports predominantly that exist for people with a physical disability, and involving able-bodied people in those sports in the interests of education, like I say, but also giving people who can only play those sports more people to play against.
Yeah.
So an awesome program that has been funded a number of times through grant programs, and they've been delivering successfully in a number of settings, including at their stadium at the university here on the Sunshine Coast from which they operate, as well as from some schools and in a corporate setting as well.
We've really been lucky to get a chance to meet these guys, because in a time when inclusive sports has become really important to a lot of groups, and there's a real push to get more people involved in physical activity, particularly people with disabilities, it's just been so wonderful to be able to look to these guys to see how a success story can play itself out. Recognizing, of course, that sometimes they don't start out like that. You were telling me earlier about their off-court situation where they hadn't at the time been doing much in the way of reporting, hey?
Yeah, so when Sharon joined the committee in 2016, the club had not submitted any annual returns since the club's establishment in 2010. So, and the reason for that, quite simply, was that they thought they didn't need to submit an annual return because their turnover was so low. Obviously, that might mean that you don't need to get your financial statements audited or verified by an accountant, but the Office of Fair Trading, still need to know what you've been turning over and who's elected to your key positions on your management committee.
And it's a great indication of how sometimes that hearsay or the Chinese whispers passes itself down along the line, and we do things the way we do them because that's what the person who I took over from told me how to do. So we just do it without questioning it, only to find out a little bit later that, we actually were supposed to do that.
Yeah, and interestingly, that was something that I think it was Sharon during the interview raised, as you'll hear, where she made the point that there was a real lack of knowledge, obviously, with a lot of new people joining the committee having not had involvement in other organisations like this one. But what we were able to do through our work together was impart on them knowledge, but more importantly than that, confidence to make decisions in the way that the management committee should make decisions, and obviously, give them the foundation pieces of knowledge and understanding that they needed to run a compliant organisation. But that being pretty easy, then to take some significant steps towards best practice rather than just doing the bare minimum.
In the grand scheme of things, Suncoast Spinners is a club it's not a massive club by any stretch of the imagination. However, you've got to look at the way that they've grown. So James was telling me today that they had 4 members regularly turning up to their weekly programs. But now that they've, in his words, semi-professionalized what they're doing, they're running a really tight program week in, week out that is attracting. The last game that they had before going off court for COVID-19 was 42 players there, 36 on court, all in chairs at once. So that's just a fantastic success story right there. And great people, and we're privileged not only with Sharon and James, but with everyone at the club. We're privileged to have a chance to work with them. So a great interview, Steve. Let's get to that now.
Thanks very much, Sharon and James, for agreeing to have a chat with me today about Suncoast Spinners Wheelchair Basketball, that over the last few years has progressed from what may have been considered as a bit of a basket case club, and certainly today now is operating as a real showcase club. So to kick us off, in 2016, which is when we first started working together, what were some of the main challenges that the club was facing at that time?
Well, 2016, Steve, was about the time that I joined the committee. Had been involved with the club for around about 4 years as a parent at the time, and came onto the committee. I guess we were, as a club, we probably hadn't grown much in membership. We had roughly around 25 members, which was a combination of players and family members that made up that 25. We probably had an average of 8 to 12 participants a week, so a rather small club. And all we ran at the time really was our weekly 2-hour basketball session and a tournament once a year. So should have been fairly straightforward, but coming into the committee, it was, you could see that there was things that were still stuck in the old pen and paper days, so everything was pen and paper. And one of the challenges we had at the time was the previous secretary to the club had to move away for medical reasons interstate, and in that process a lot of the club documentation had been lost in transit. So coming into the committee, we were starting from scratch, so it was probably a good thing because we had to go and find and look through all these things, the constitution and all those sorts of things. And when we first met up with you through Courtney, it became quite obvious that the committee at the time's understanding of how to run a committee and meetings and what their role was somewhat different to what you explained to us as what it should be. So when we came to you, we were all of that general assumption that every time a decision had to be made, we'd go to all the members, we'd call in all the members and we'd ask them all what we thought, and we'd get 25 different answers, and then we'd try to make a decision. So that's basically how the club was run then. It was quite small. We did the odd demonstration and workshops. We had quite a low turnover. We didn't have a lot of financial needs at the time, and it was a rather self-sufficient little club, but it was very much the same people that had been running the club for the last 10 years, were still running the club. It was a management committee of 3 people, and it wasn't growing into the IT world, I guess, so it needed some changes there.
Yep. And that's really interesting. And I had actually forgotten that regular general meeting process was being followed until you've just reminded me of that now. And it's a really common thing. A lot of clubs, a lot of associations assume, even those, which might be far bigger than the club was back then, with, kind of 8 to 12 regularly engaged people and in the order of 25 members, even organisations with much larger membership still think that they need to go and consult their general membership on absolutely everything. And as you will have back then experienced, and certainly larger organisations do still, it's so inefficient to make decisions that way. And as you said, you get 25 different opinions. And this is exactly why the management committee is elected, by the members at each AGM is to make decisions on their behalf. And, we essentially, as a general membership of a club, say, you go and make the decisions, you run the club, and if we're unhappy about anything, we'll let you know.
Yeah. And I think also back then in 2016, Steve, the committee was running off a constitution that they thought was compliant, and it ends up that you explained to us that it wasn't compliant and helped us out with a new set of rules. And so that was really helpful in teaching the committee what our roles were around the rules.
Yes, yep. And certainly then we always say that, the Constitution should be one of the first steps in trying to modernise and enhance an organisation's governance, because often, clubs will be held back by a constitution that says that they have to do things a certain way. For example, our management committee includes these 8 or 10 positions. That's then somewhat hamstringing, in that the club really needs to call for and strive to call for nominations for all those positions and strive to fill them all at the AGM. Whereas, as you guys have come to realise, your management committee really should be a lean, strategic decision-making body, and then you should, divest some of the operational decisions and day-to-day running of the club to different either subcommittees or individuals, and that might be, equipment officers, or it might be program managers or coaches, and they can then go and do a really good job of the day-to-day stuff without the management committee needing to be involved in all of that.
That's exactly right, Steve. And that's exactly the solutions that we implemented in the 2016 following the first discussions.
So how did it feel to be involved in the club? At that time, what would be the best word to sum up how it felt to come into that situation in 2016?
It was a little bit confusing, I guess, and frustrating, but there did seem to be a lot of scope to improve on those management roles and responsibilities, and going forward with the club in a stronger position.
Okay. What about you, James? What do you reckon?
From my point of view, at that point in time, I was transitioning from what was a player for 4 years and then being mentored by the president at the time to then be a coach. So it was, as you said before, had a bit of hope that the club would come to a bit more of a strategized sort of committee, and then sort of formalize a bit better and have a bit more of a professional output, I guess.
Okay. Good. And I suppose that's a really important point for other clubs, because a lot of clubs are in that exact same situation, and new people take on a role and they realise, oh gosh, maybe there was a little more to this role than I first thought when sticking my hand up, or when someone else nominated me at the AGM for this position. It's good for other clubs who are struggling to make decisions because they've got a constitution which is outdated and holding them back, or they've got individual members who might have all of the knowledge and experience in their own head, some of whom may have then left, as you said, Sharon, earlier was the case for you guys. And that's so common. We've got volunteer organisations where people come, people go. We've got in most cases, a 1-year term of office for management committee members. So business continuity and ensuring that the club can remain successful from one committee to the next is a challenge that a lot of clubs face. And it's great for other clubs to hear, as you guys have, you've been able to go from that situation where there weren't a lot of systems in place and things were happening the way that always happened, and even though you've got a small membership, you have been able to demonstrate that you can make that transition to a situation where then you're operating according to the principles of really good governance. So we touched on the Constitution and the fact that we worked together quite early on to get that modernised. So obviously then, we've done a few governance training and mentoring programs over the last few years, and as you said, Sharon, we were able to educate the committee back in 2016 and then the committees of each year thereafter as to some of the really important decision making powers that a committee has, and that you've got the ability to accept applications for membership and to call anyone to account who might have stepped out of line in terms of the club's codes of conduct or behaviour. In terms of then how the club has improved its overall governance, as well as its service delivery offering to members, what are some of the other things that you as a committee have been implementing over the last few years?
Well, I guess the biggest program we've been running is our reverse inclusion program, which was funded initially through the NDIA ILC grant scheme, which is the program's really about encouraging able-bodied people to join in and play wheelchair sports as a mechanism for inclusion. And we've been delivering that now since 2017 into schools, the university here on the Sunshine Coast, and community groups. And it's been very successful for us. And I guess one of the reasons we've been able to take on that role and deliver that program, Steve, is that participating in the governance training, we were able to get all of our constitution, our rules, our bylaws, and our end of financial year audits, our fair trading obligations. We were able to get all those things in line, which made us able to apply for these grants, because to apply for these larger grants, you had to have all your financials in place, or your rules, or your bylaws. You had to have all those sort of things in place. And previously, before we did this training, we weren't at that stage. So having that guidance, I guess, really helped us secure those grants. So, and we've been able to continue to access that funding over the last few years and continue to deliver. And being able to get that community exposure has then grown our membership and grown our club. And, to the point now that we do have online membership forms, we have online accounting software, we have a bookkeeper that manages all of our reporting. So we have a lot more means to ensure that we remain compliant and we can provide better services for our members. Reverse inclusion in itself has become quite well known nationally in Australia as the concept, and is being adopted by other clubs, which is what we wanted. We wanted the broader community to adopt inclusive sport participation, and that does seem to be working. So it has sort of met its purpose, I guess, the programs that we delivered.
Yeah, it's a fantastic initiative, and the flow-on benefits of having received that successfully received that grant funding and being able to roll that program out, and for it to be building into a real showcase example of what can be done to enhance the understanding of inclusive sport and physical activity, and then also obviously on the ground service delivery opportunities for people around the country outside of the areas in which you guys deliver that program is a huge achievement that you should all be very proud of. But certainly, as you said earlier, Sharon, you know, there's not a lot of sense in going and launching into a huge program like that if you haven't already got your house in order. And that's why I certainly agree it was really important for you as a committee to pick some of that low-hanging fruit early on and get the constitution in order and get our meeting procedures sorted out and get our governance to be more in line with the way that we should be operating as a community sport and recreation organisation, so that then you've got the capacity to firstly tap into some pretty significant grant funding and then deliver the programs that you promise you'll deliver if you get that money successfully.
Yeah, the risk management plan that we developed alongside with you, Steve, is very important for those grant applications, along with the strategic plan that we've been working on with you for the last 6 months, I guess. Those things, they're really important in that grant application to have them in place and understand their importance. So that's been really beneficial to us as well.
That's really interesting that you say that, because it's often a question that gets asked when a club or association, picks up the phone and says, hey, we've been told we need a strategic plan so that we can get grants. Will a strategic plan result in us getting more grants? And I always say not necessarily. Just having a strategic plan isn't going to be the be all and end all to getting grant funding. But what it does do is it enables you to demonstrate very clearly that a project that you want to achieve or a program that you want to deliver has been identified through a consultative strategic planning process where you've engaged with your members and you've engaged with other external stakeholders, where that plan is then able to be pointed to in your funding application and say, look, we haven't just developed this concept because this grant is available. We've developed this concept because it's been identified as a high priority project through our strategic plan, or it's a risk that we've identified through our risk management planning process, and therefore we've gone looking for money and this funding program fits the bill and therefore we're seeking funding from you. That's a far stronger position to be arguing for grant dollars than just, oh yeah, we saw the money become available so we thought we'd make that work. So that's certainly interesting, but not surprising to hear that those planning documents have helped to provide.
Hey Steve, when we were first approached to undertake that first governance training, I was quite sceptical because we'd never undertaken any sort of professional training before in governance, and I was a little bit sceptical of what will be the value of spending this type of money on that training. But given that that was 2016 and we've come back almost every year since and continue to invest in governance training, I've found it quite invaluable to have that knowledge, particularly when you've got a very diverse range of members and they've all got they all come with their different expectations of what a management committee should be doing and how they should be doing it. But to have the knowledge that we are doing it correctly and we do know what we're doing, it's really important to have, and it's certainly serving our committee quite well.
And do you think that a lot of that value then, based on what you just said, is centred around the confidence that the committee develops through that capacity building?
Yes, absolutely. Confidence and as you know, the support that we get from knowing that we have that tool available to us to draw on, yourself or your organisation or the documents that we have. I'm always going to our constitution or pulling extracts out of our risk management plan or our strategic plan and using those to justify what we're doing. where we're going as a club. I think it's really important.
And that confidence is also filtrated through from the committee to the members themselves. So over time now it's being, and the members sort of question something, it's not a, let me think about that real quick and I'll get back to you maybe next week. It's within maybe 2 or 3 days after a conversation with yourself or someone else from CPR, a very quick conversation as to, no, that's the answer. We did it last week in the mentoring or the training or whatever it may have been. And there's a response to the problem immediately, essentially.
Yeah. Oh, look, and that's really good to hear. And we often, when we first start working with an organisation, we'll say it would be great for you and for us if this was a long-term arrangement, because the organisations that get the most benefit from us providing support are those that we work with for the long term. It's not just the clubs where they say, oh, can we have a constitution review, or can you help us write a strategic plan? And it's, a 6-month engagement, say. But those organisations like you guys, who have been working together for years and years, and your capacity has grown over time, and our knowledge of your unique situation has developed over the last few years significantly as well. I remember there was a light bulb moment for me quite early on in our work together, where it came to light that able-bodied people can participate in wheelchair basketball as well. And indeed, this is, the foundation of reverse inclusion. But even before reverse inclusion was a concept by name that had been born, this was a huge learning curve for me. So that, obviously, every time I get a chance to talk with anyone else about it, I do, and I sing the praises of the club very highly. But that showed a level of ignorance on my part that shouldn't exist, because I work in this space. Sport and rec is my day-to-day life. Yet it was still a new, like I say, light bulb moment for me that, oh, okay, cool, right. And people indeed, should be more prolifically exposed to that message, and it's something that you guys have been doing a great job of, over the last few years, is spreading that word that anyone can get involved, and indeed that helps to ensure a better participation environment for those people that are confined to wheelchair sports. So just quickly then, before we wrap up, how does it feel now to be involved in the club? James as a coach and jack of all trades in the organisation, and Sharon as a management committee member. How does it feel now, in contrast to how it felt back in 2016 when you first got involved in voluntary capacities in the club? How does that compare with today?
Good question. Back then, it like I said, it was a smaller club. The scope of what we deliver now is so much larger. The workload has grown, so I wouldn't say it's necessarily easier. Like we've already said, we do have the confidence to know that what we're doing is correct, or we do know what the right path is that we need to take when we take on challenges or events. And it's not necessarily easier, but we are much more confident in our decisions. We are doing so much more though. So to give you an idea, before the shutdown, the COVID-19 shutdown, our last Wednesday night session was probably one of the largest weekly sessions the club's ever had. And we had 35 people on court. And,
wow.
If you take that from 5 years ago, where there were weeks when we had 4 or 5 people on court, it's certainly grown. So therefore, obviously, the work that we have to do grows. But our management committee's grown over that time. We now have a 5-person management committee, and we also now have more regular staff, volunteers, but staff that are there each week. So that supports the growth of the club as well. But It is different, but everyone on our committee does know what their role is, and we all know, we're all confident that we're compliant, and that's really reassuring to keep going and keep growing as a club.
Very good. Yeah. What about you, James? How does it feel?
It definitely feels good in some aspects, and like Sharon said, we are growing, and definitely the confidence is there. But with growth, we're unraveling a whole lot more positives and a whole lot more negatives with that. So the good comes with the bad, unfortunately. But with the help of you guys, we're continuing to increase the committee members' confidence in what they're doing, and having clearer policies and systems and more structured meetings. And that's flowing through from the committee members down to who now we have a structured coaching committee, I guess. And at the moment we're in consultation with yourself, with some mentoring, and with processes for member protection and conflict resolution and whatnot. So yeah, whilst the growth has definitely been good, it's also had its negatives along the way. But yeah, exactly. Yeah, like Sharon says, we're working through them, and we're excited to sort of continue working with you guys and develop the club to a bigger and better club, I suppose.
And yeah, you've just nailed it, I think, in saying that you're uncovering continually more things that present as challenges, and that's certainly something that we've learnt. Working in this field, predominantly volunteer-led and administered organisations, for many years, we are still learning, and we always will be. And volunteers who accept that they're never going to know everything, and they're never going to have everything exactly right all of the time, is a really positive thing, because hopefully it will then lead us to all have a growth mindset where we acknowledge, yep, sure, someone might come, and some member might come to the committee and say, hey, I'm really dissatisfied with this, and a committee that welcomes that suggestion with open arms and open ears is going to be able to far better serve the members of that organisation, because some of those ideas are really good ones, and they'll help to improve the club service delivery today, but they'll also potentially make things easier for next year's committee and for the committee of 10 years time. So it's a really important thing, I think, and this is why it's great, as we've touched on, for us to have an ongoing working partnership, really, where we continue to learn from you guys, and to collaborate to navigate the challenges that will continually present themselves as the club grows and changes the way that it delivers its services. And we're able to then continually impart any knowledge that's new to us on you, and help to build the capacity of the committee to continue to improve its service delivery for members. So very quickly then, one last question. Given that this podcast is all about basket case clubs, and how some clubs are able to, through the commitment and hard work of their volunteer administrators and committees, turn themselves into showcase clubs, if you were to recommend to other basket case clubs one thing to focus on improving, what do you think that would be?
I think the one thing that's been really beneficial in our club is what Sharon and I touched on briefly before we jumped on with you, Steve, was having the committee to be, and you actually just touched on it previously as well, was having the committee able to be open, have an open discussion, and no one actually be personally offended or take anything the wrong way. Everyone's got their own opinions to share and their own drives. And the thing is that whilst one person may be a minority, that idea might be a great idea if everyone jumps on board, or if it's taken in the right manner. So having a committee that is one, confident in what they're doing and able to communicate freely within one another, and then conveying the messages to the members. Again, not asking, but conveying the messages is something to definitely focus on.
Yeah, great. And I think that that sums it up really well, is that, that need for commitment amongst the management committee in the first instance to speak openly, to challenge others' ideas for the right reasons, not just because, I don't like you or you don't like me, therefore I'm going to disagree with everything that you say, but, where good ideas come into a committee meeting and those ideas are challenged, and then the decisions that are made at that meeting lead to outcomes which are better for the general membership and those who receive the club services because of that willingness to speak and to debate openly ideas at meetings. And that's why we have meetings. We don't have one person that runs your club. Rather, we've got a management committee that run the club, and then, as you touched on, James, divest some responsibilities to other teams or individuals in the organisation, because one person couldn't possibly challenge their own ideas, and one person couldn't be representative of everyone's perspectives. So meetings exist to challenge each other's ideas, and they exist to cause debate and discussion. So a committee where that happens openly and with confidence, typically, and certainly as is the case for you guys, leads to decisions which lead to good outcomes for the club's members. So I reckon that's a good place to leave it. Thank you both very, very much for your time. We look forward to continuing our work together indefinitely into the future, and you certainly are a great example of a club that has developed over the past few years into becoming a showcase club.
Oh, thank you very much for having us, Steve. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
Well, that brings us to the end of another show. Thanks everyone again for joining us on Basket Case Clubs, where we've been able to hear firsthand a story of a great showcase club that used to be a basket case club. Steve, great job working with Suncoast Spinners.
Yeah, they are one of the organisations that we point to in a lot of discussions with other clubs in relation to an organisation that has really taken control of their own destiny and has achieved some great things by informing themselves, gaining the confidence to run a successful club, and doing so over the course of a few very short years.
Absolutely, a fantastic group. Thank you again for joining us this evening, and remember to follow us on social media, subscribe to our newsletter if you haven't already. There's lots of great stuff going out there, and check out our information that we're posting on our website as well. And of course, feel free to drop us a line at any time. Well, I say that, but probably not at 2 a.m. because I'm usually busy pushing up Z's at about that time of day. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and until next time, keep safe.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.